Hi, my name is Jessica Rancourt, and I am a first-year student at Worcester State University. Before I get started, I just want to quickly say thank you for watching my project about writer's block and finding its solutions. To get started, writer's block is a very widespread issue that is faced by many students and scholars across a variety of disciplines, and it is defined by Merriam-Webster as a psychological inhibition to start or continue the writing process. It ultimately prevents students from achieving their goals and hinders their ability to use writing as a tool to their advantage in society. We find that with Gen Z, the students in that generation find a lot of opportunities to use their voice to enact social change and raise awareness for various issues facing humanity today. And a big part of that is using writing, whether it just be writing their speech or using actual words as part of raising awareness. And if they struggle with writer's block, that's a big roadblock that just gets in the way. And it's very important that the goal of the study is to raise awareness of writer's block's prevalence and share coping strategies so that students who want to share their voice or succeed academically don't feel stuck in place and they know how to overcome it. Before I go further, I just want to say that I decided to research this topic because I myself have been dealing with writer's block since freshman year of high school. And I wanted to research some strategies to manage it because I always thought that I was just doing something wrong. And through the research, I also wanted to know if other students at Worcester State also experienced the same thing I did, or if it was just me and I needed to find a solution for just me. But through this research, I found that it's very prevalent, and I want to share that with people so that they understand they're not alone if they face writer's block and that there's ways to manage it and cope with it. For background in literature, there hasn't been a lot of research done on writer's block, unfortunately, and finding appropriate and relevant literature to look at was a little bit difficult. What I did find is that the research that has been done has several causes for writer's block that range from more personal causes to much broader issues. One of the causes that was discussed by most of the literature I reviewed is fear of being criticized for what you're writing or fear of failure. And writing in general is an activity that reflects the writer and what they value. And putting thoughts onto paper, especially for students that don't find writing to be very popular within their major, it'll make them feel kind of vulnerable, and it creates a scenario for many students where they worry they'll write the wrong thing or embarrass themselves, and we don't want that. Additionally, assessment of writing and school life are other contributing factors. The way one's writing is being assessed, and in college, pretty much every writing assignment is going to be graded. And that has a big impact on the students' flow of ideas, as they may just try to impress the teacher or make it a perfect piece of writing. And furthermore, the stress of other courses and workload and everything is a big limitation that puts a lot of stress on the student and kind of takes their focus away from that writing piece they're supposed to be working on. And one interesting thing I read about as a cause is perfect draft syndrome, kind of going off the perfect piece of writing I just mentioned. Perfect draft syndrome is pretty much just the need to create a perfect draft right away. It's something that certainly causes a roadblock in the student's ability to write effectively, as they just spend too much time focusing on finding the perfect word for that sentence or making the right sentences that fit with the right transitions, instead of just writing and trusting the revision process, which is something that I personally have struggled with a lot. As for my question and hypothesis, pretty much I just wanted to answer the question, are Worcester State University students facing writer's block? And if so, how do they cope with it? Do they have any strategies? And even though some, as I'm going to discuss in my results, only one student said they had never faced writer's block. Wish I was them for sure, but pretty much even if they don't face writer's block, they kind of know what it is, and they might have some suggestions for how to manage it, because if they don't face writer's block, they're doing something right. And my hypothesis was that many Worcester State students do face writer's block or have some kind of strategy for coping with it. For my methods, I started with a review of literature as I just discussed, and from there I created a 21 question survey for students at Worcester State to complete. Survey questions I'll go over in a minute. They're in Appendix A on the next page. They vary in the type of questions and ask different questions about the student themselves and the writing process and writer's block, things like that. And I sent this survey to different teachers to distribute to one of their 100 level introductory courses so that I can get answers from a range of students with a range of majors, interests, backgrounds, and ages. So let's just take a look at Appendix A right here. So these questions, there's 21 of them. A lot of them are kind of general, like more focused on the student, not so much writer's block. And then there's some more about the writing process. And then it gets more into writer's block specifically towards the end. And then in Appendix B, those are the options for question 7, which was like a multiple choice, like they got to select different things. And that's just all the options that I had put aside for that question. So if you want, you can take a look at those later. And back to the results and discussion. So I did only have 29 responses. I'll circle back to this in a few minutes. But I only had 29 responses, and they were very varied responses in terms of the online learning transition, which is one of the questions I asked. Some students found their motivation to dwindled as a result of the transition from more in-person learning to online. To quote some of the student responses, they said, "I'm far less motivated and I struggle to grasp material." Another student said that they procrastinate more. Everything seems like busy work and it's just not the same experience. It feels less personal. And so those are students that found that their motivation kind of declined a little bit after this transition. And there were a couple students that actually found it to help them succeed. One student said that they've actually done better in classes. They feel like they have more control. Another said they feel like they have more time. And another said it actually motivated them more. As an introvert, they feel more in their comfort zone, which I thought was a very interesting point to bring up. 100% of students that responded said they have to write papers for at least one of their classes, and 96.6% said that their major requires papers to be written. So writing is definitely a big part of the college curriculum here at Worcester State and everywhere else, regardless of your major. And writing being a part of the career students are pursuing is kind of split about 50-50. Some, like about half of them will believe that they'll have to write for whatever career they're going to end up being in, and the other half won't have to write as much. And just over 24% of students said that they enjoyed the writing process, and the majority of 69% said that it just depends on what class they're writing for. And writing comes easily to just under 38% of student responses, and again, the majority find it easy depending on the class they're writing for. Some of the major contributing factors to student motivation are pressure and stress, workload, and the subject of the course that has the biggest impact on their motivation. And those are followed by the learning and working environment they're in and the relevance of the course to their major. Some students might find it hard to focus or take an interest in classes that they just have to take. It's not required for their major, which is understandable and will definitely affect one's motivation to write, which affects their likelihood of dealing with writer's block. And a lot of students are definitely more stressed due to the pandemic, in addition to the online learning transition, whether or not they were directly affected by it. And many students do have various writing processes. So about half of them brainstorm and really look through all their ideas before they start writing, and the other half tend to free write and just go for it and just go back and revise it once they're done. And like I said before, majority of students have experienced writer's block, and several of them do have strategies for coping with it. Some of the strategies that came up in not only in the literature I reviewed, but also was discussed in the student responses are the writing environment, where their writing definitely has an impact on whether or not they have to, whether or not they are successful in managing writer's block. If they're in an effective working environment where they can focus really well, that definitely helps. Reducing stressors is a big one. Not procrastinating, which if you procrastinate and you wait till the last second, that does add to stress, of course. And when you're more stressed, your mind's all jumbled up and it's hard to focus on one thing. Being self-disciplined is important. Just writing, like free writing, like some of the students said that they do for their writing process. Free writing is a great way to just get going, even if you just have to know that it's not going to be your final draft. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just starting to write is getting some ideas down. And even that, like if you need to take breaks, that's also a good idea too. And just thinking about what you're writing about, if you are on your break and you think of something, just take a note, and then so that you can go back to it later, you can keep those ideas flowing. And it's also important to break down the writing process if you need to break it into smaller chunks so that it seems more achievable and less stressful. That's also a good idea. And rewarding yourself after achieving each small goal is a great way to make it seem like a more achievable process. And yep, so those are some strategies that I found students talked about and liked, and strategies that worked for them, and some that were discussed in the literature I reviewed. Now, some limitations that I had while doing my research project. As I said before, my results, I only got 29 responses, which was unfortunate, but it's still a starting point as not much research has been done on this topic anyway. I wouldn't use this data to generalize it to the entire population of Worcester State, let alone college students as a whole. But I think it does help me see better. It answers my question and helps me see better that it is more prevalent than I originally thought and that many students originally think, which is what I wanted to do. And I think in the future, which I'll discuss in a minute, I definitely want more responses, broader range of students. And additionally, like I said before, there hasn't been a lot of previous research. It certainly makes it more difficult to find things to support my findings. And it was hard to get a nice, decent background on the topic. And lastly, communication difficulties, of course, during pandemic. It's hard to talk to teachers about getting this out there, explaining exactly what I want to do. It's hard to find times to meet during Zoom, a lot of communications over email, which is difficult as well sometimes. But overall, I'm sure in the future it'll be easier. And for future research, like I said, larger population for future studies, try to reach more students. Ideally as many as possible. We definitely reach more than 29. And that'll make it easier to generalize it to the Worcester State population. And then from there, it can even go bigger to different colleges across many cities, states, nations, areas, wherever. And maybe even in more studies, we go more in depth, analyzing things in a more psychological way, perhaps, or even getting involved in individual majors, seeing which majors face it more, if one faces it more than another, or things like that in general. So that is it for my project, review the reality of writer's block and the importance of finding its solutions. And again, if you want to refer to the appendix to look at my actual survey questions, you can, and Appendix B for the options for number 7. So that is there for you as well. And thank you for taking the time to watch my project. I really appreciate you doing that and taking an interest in this topic as much as I did. Thank you so much.